Hi, it's Renee Bird, and I'm here with an amazing guest. I've been really excited about this one. His name is Peter Ticktin, and he is the founder of the Global Warming Foundation, and he's also a lawyer. And he's created something really special. I think you all can agree in this time. This is a topic of conversation. A lot of people speak about it, but really, what does it mean, climate change? What does global warming mean? So I'm really, really excited to introduce you to Peter. How are you, Peter? So lovely
Oh,
to
fine,
have you.
thank you. It's nice to be here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. And how have you been? I think it's always the first question. We're in a very unprecedented time, so I always like to know how you're feeling.
Oh boy, are we ever in an unprecedented time on so many different levels, uh,
Definitely.
you know, politically, environmentally, especially.
Yeah.
So I would say, and economically too. I mean, look at the coronavirus and
No.
where we are with that. But I would say that global warming doesn't stop. It
No, it
did. We slowed down a little bit with our carbon emissions when so many people were not working and not burning. But nevertheless, it still gets worse and worse.
yes, it does. Mm.
Yeah,
And
you
my
know,
question to you, Peter, sorry to cut you. I just want to find out, firstly, you've been practicing as a lawyer. So that's your beginning of your story. When did that start and what did you practice? There's so many elements of law. What's your major, if there is such thing? What's your
okay.
specialization?
These are that I I was supposed to be a doctor. My father was a doctor, and my background is in science. And I actually got into medical school in Canada and had 1 year of medical school, but I didn't really want to be a doctor.
Mhm.
I uh, I just couldn't see doing the same thing over and over again. I felt that they're taking all these very very bright minds and they're making technicians out of them all.
Mhm.
A special level of technical skill, but nevertheless, after 5 heart transplants as a surgeon, I felt I was going to be a plumber, which is nothing wrong with being a plumber either. But
Of course.
the fact of the matter is that a friend of mine showed me cases that he was studying in law school, and so I looked at those, and that was just beautiful for me. It just that I had an instant love for that kind of
Mm.
thinking, that kind of work. So I left medical school, and the next year I attended law school,
Okay.
and then I practiced in Ontario, uh, in Canada, for a number of years, and then eventually relocated down to Florida.
Okay.
But in the meantime, also, I had learned in my first year of college, my first year of university, there was a book that came out about global warming, and I started thinking about it at that point in time. And it became something that was very real to me. And by the mid 70s, I knew that it was true and had practiced as a criminal lawyer. But still, my background, once your background's in science, that's who and what you are. That's how you think.
Yes.
And so I bought a farm and went into farming. I felt I had to learn these things because I saw global warming as not only real, but real within my lifetime. And that was over 50 years ago. And all the things that I had basically predicted, and by the way, I would tell you that when you're ahead of your time, it's a very lonely situation. Nobody, I had no friends that agreed with me. Everybody thought I was out of my mind, which was problematic. Because I believed in global warming and I was strong about it all the way back then, and I couldn't find anybody else to be on the same page as I was.
Mm-hmm.
But nevertheless, I moved forward. Now they tell me that they thought I was crazy, and now they see that I was a visionary. And I say,
Absolutely.
well, that's too bad that you see me as having been a visionary. Why aren't I one now if I was one then?
That's correct.
And so, in fact, this has been my raison d'etre for my whole life in terms of global warming. I've done a good number of things. I've been in front of Supreme Court of Canada, Supreme Court of California, Supreme Court of Florida. I had a very active legal career and a successful one, but that's not what really makes the sum total of my life. The Global Warming Foundation is much more important to me than And the other is because, as you mentioned earlier, when I was speaking to you before the show, what difference does anything else make if we don't have our world?
Right. And
So, uh, so seeing the importance back then gives me advantage. If you're doing anything, it doesn't matter what it is, whether you're braiding hair or you're an ophthalmologist or whatever it is that you're doing. If you do it for 50 years, you get to higher and higher levels of understanding.
mhm.
And so, for all the newcomers that are now worried about global warming and they're in the panic stage, or they're just past the panic stage, or they haven't even gotten to the panic stage yet, but there's different phases we go through in terms of understanding the whole situation.
Mm,
So it gives me a better field of reference, so to speak, if because of the fact that I've had this understanding for so long.
wow. And you're
And
right, everyone's panicking because they can see it. It's something that has been on the tip of the tongue. They've had various conferences and, global leaders talking about the manifesto for climate change. And little by little, it's been quite interesting to see 2020 has been unprecedented with COVID. And then you've just seen a charade of things happening around the world prior to that, that was not coincidental. And now it's happening on everyone's front door, as they say, doorstep. And now they're like, help me, please. And code red, when I saw that flashed across the screens, I was like, oh, red is not a really, amber, I don't mind. Maybe green, I actually prefer. But to see code red, it scared me because I realized they're saying we're there now. And
well,
what
we
do
are,
we do?
and I can explain that.
Please explain.
Okay. Well, within the last month, okay, we've seen floods in New Jersey and New York. We know that from recent hurricane that went through, but Western Europe, closer to your
Yes.
territory, in Germany and West Belgium, they had what 196 people died. I'm just talking about in the last month.
That's correct.
We had floods in Central. Let's talk about floods first. Central America, Central Mexico, where 17 died, mainly because of a loss of power, but also cars get swept away. Ecuador. These are just floods within the last 30 days. Colombia, Venezuela, uh, 20 missing in Tennessee. Uh, the North Carolina had floods, flash floods, as we know about in New York. But Arizona had floods. Texas had floods. Nebraska had 5 inches of rain in one storm, caused flash floods. El Salvador, Utah, Trinidad, Tobago, Uganda, Sudan, Ghana, Nigeria. This is all within the last month. Had floods where people were either died or property damage was up there, homes destroyed. Ethiopia, Somalia, Cameroon, India, Thailand, China, Japan, the Philippines. So, I mean, that's just looking at the number of places where we've had floods. About 50 years ago, there might have been 70 events, or I'm sorry, 700 events that were extreme weather in a year. Now we
Mm,
have 3,000. Now, don't get me wrong, there's other reasons for that. Sometimes population growth, because 50 years ago, we were probably more like 4 billion population, whereas now we're like 8 billion population. So we are in places that might have been hit by a tornado before nobody would have noticed.
mm,
But now, so the population growth gets into this too. But believe me, having 3,000 of these events as opposed to 700 of them is a major increase. But you don't have to look at just floods. Look at heat waves. I'm not sure people realize this, but we're looking at water and rising oceans. Well, right now, the biggest thing that's causing rising oceans is water that's frozen on land that melts and then flows into the oceans. And Greenland is our biggest part of it right now. I mean, eventually it will be the Antarctic, but right now Greenland is adding greatly to it. Well, it was above freezing. It was melting and raining on the summit in Greenland during this last month. So these heat waves aren't necessarily the kind of heat waves like we had in June, where it hit 130 degrees in Portland. Uh, we were seeing extreme heat. They say that's 1 in 1,000 years, but don't believe that either. Uh, so heat waves could be just something that's still cold or pretty cool out there, but it's melting the ice. So the waters will rise because of that.
mm.
We've seen that in the Pacific Northwest, we've seen tremendous heat waves. And we've seen it in Europe. Look at what's going on in Greece there. I mean, it was during this last month, we've seen 116 degrees Fahrenheit, which would be, I think, 47 degrees Celsius. So we're seeing all of these things happen. We see it in wildfires. We're seeing, with the smoke from the wildfires in the northwest of the United States and British Columbia, Canada, were sufficient enough that it caused the air on the East Coast in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine to be unsafe. This 3,000 miles away. So, it's, and I will tell you that as bad as the wildfires are, you know how they say, remember the good old days? I'm telling you, these are the good old days. Okay. Every year, the wildfires have gotten worse, and they're going to be worse next year than they are this year, and they're going to be worse the year after that until we have more massive types of conflagrations. But that's still not the worst part of the situation. By the way, when we're looking at wildfires, they're in Siberia. What I tell you about the United States or what might go on in Europe, this is happening all around the world. It's happening in Africa. It's happening in Asia. It's happening in South America. It's happening in North America. It is everywhere. So when these people, these alarmists, ring the alarm and say, everybody, it's a red light now. They're right. This has been a gradual progression, but it's an exponential progression. So it's kind of like the story about, if I give you a penny today and 2 cents tomorrow and 4 cents the next day, 8 cents, 16 cents, at the end of a month, at 30 days, how much do you think I'm giving? If I just double it every day for 30 days. If you do this on paper, you'll find that on the 30th day alone, it's more than $5 million. This is what geometric progressions are like. And because of feedback effects, and I'll explain what a feedback effect is. Okay, feedback effects are like this. So we know the northern part of the world, let's say in winter, is frozen over and it's white. And snow reflects 95% of the heat's energy, of the energy from the sun. Okay. It all goes back out to space. And we know that the dark ocean, where the ice melts and you've got dark water, almost black, 80% is absorbed. Only 20% is reflected. So when we warm up a little bit, the water around the ice warms up. It takes in more energy. As the warming goes, we have less ice and more black water. Because we have more black water, we have more absorption from the sun. So it's a feedback effect. In other words, it causes it to multiply in its effect. That's why it's not a straight line curve. Okay. Or let's talk about the band around the Earth that is permafrost. Okay. We know it's frozen. It has been frozen. Well, that little rim around the Earth is getting smaller and smaller, and it's moving north, leaving areas that now defrost every summer that didn't defrost before. Well, that's organic material. That's ain't from prehistoric times. That could be 1 million years old. That material, once bacteria get into it, which it will automatically, instantly, once it gets melted, it starts to compost. And when it composts, methane gas, CH4, comes out of the permafrost and into the atmosphere. So what methane gas is about 20 times more effective as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide is. And you have lakes that form in what was the permafrost, where it's now melting. And those lakes look like boiling water. There's so much methane coming out and into the atmosphere. So that's another feedback effect. The more we melt, the more we melt.
Get it.
So that's the way it works. I mentioned the greenhouse effect, but really that's a misnomer. There is no such thing as a greenhouse effect. I know everybody uses those terms, but really, if you would think that our atmosphere is almost all nitrogen and oxygen. And if it were only nitrogen and oxygen and we had no carbon dioxide or vapor in our atmosphere, then part of the world would be 200 degrees or hotter than that during the day, and the part that's night would be hundreds of degrees below zero. We would be like the moon if we didn't have any atmosphere, or if we only had oxygen and nitrogen. You know how light comes from the sun or from the stars? They come right through our atmosphere. They don't stop on the way and dilly-dally and say, I think I'll hang around here in the middle of the atmosphere. They come right through. Oxygen doesn't stop light. Nitrogen doesn't stop light. Oxygen and nitrogen also don't stop infrared rays. They don't stop the heat. So if the ground were to heat up during the day, it would radiate out at night. It would go right through that atmosphere and go right out to outer space. And that's why you'd have these vast differences between day and night. Instead, Earth is positioned in such a way that we have just the right amount of other things in the atmosphere that hold the heat, like carbon molecules or carbon atoms that are part of molecules. And so, I mean, if you were to take, let's take my cell phone, okay? Let's pretend this is a piece of carbon. And let's hold this above the ground, okay? And then all day the sun hits it and hits the ground. So at night, it radiates the energy that's now in here, things moving a little bit faster, and energy in the ground that's moving faster, it radiates out, it comes out. And it would go up to space, except the stuff on the ground runs into this. So this absorbs that stuff that came from the ground, and it's radiating not only up, but also down to the Earth. So by having this piece of carbon in the middle of the air over here above the ground, it is holding some of the heat that otherwise would have gone to outer space. If I take this and break it in half, which I'm not going to be able to do, break this in half, then I'd have two pieces. They would radiate back and forth to each other. Or if I broke it into 1,000 pieces, I'd have all those 1,000 pieces of carbon that would all be in the air, radiating heat back and forth to each other. So it's not all going out to space because it's being maintained between them. It doesn't require a piece of glass like a greenhouse over the atmosphere. That's not there. That doesn't exist. It has nothing to do with the ozone layer or anything like that. It has to do with the interaction between one piece of carbon and another piece of carbon. But if I really want to make this into a gazillion pieces of carbon, all I have to do is burn it. Then it separates out, and every single atom of carbon combines with two atoms of oxygen, CO2, gets formed. And then you have all these pieces of carbon that are floating all around the atmosphere, bouncing energy back and forth to each other. So I thought I'd give you the benefit of explaining to you what the heck is going on. Why is this doing anything? It is because as opposed to oxygen and nitrogen, which form 20 and 80% of our roughly of our atmosphere, the little bit of carbon dioxide that we have in there holds it in, and also vapor from water also holds it in. So that's what's going on. And the more we pump in, which is what, 20 million gallons of oil we burn a day in the United States, 80 million barrels of oil throughout the world, to say nothing of the hundreds of millions of tons of coal. I mean, we are absolutely polluting the atmosphere with these little tiny pieces of carbon. And that's why I mentioned when I said methane, CH4, because it's important to note it's that little piece of carbon in the CH4 that is what's going on, that's in the atmosphere. And so I hope
Yeah,
that
it's
helps.
really broken it down because I never understood what that meant. I always thought when they said greenhouse, I thought it was literally just not able to come out. But now you've explained it. I see. So we're just literally just warming up inside, warming up,
Right.
warming up, warming up, warming up, warming up.
We're warming up, warming up, warming up, and then we have two sides politically to this whole question, and both sides are wrong. Okay, both sides are dead wrong. In the United States, we have the Republicans versus the Democrats. In England, you've got
Conservative, Labour,
conservatives, Labor, yeah, liberals.
Democrats, if they're all together, all of them are together anyway. Okay, so
So one side says there is no such thing as global warming.
that's correct.
And they try to change the whole thing by saying, "Oh, you can't say it's made by man; it's made by God, or it's cyclical, or whatever it is that they want to say." But they're in denial. So for sure, denial isn't just a river in Egypt. Okay,
Mhm.
denial is that there's no global warming, which is absurd. We can see it. I mean, look at the places that just flooded this last month.
Yeah,
But it's not the floods that are going to get us, and I'll get to that if you wish.
please do.
Um, but at the other side of the political spectrum, they say there is global warming and we have to do something about it. And they're in a panic about it. And they think that their ideas are the ways of stopping it. So what do they want to do? Okay, I'm not going to, get into the craziness of building a tunnel from California to Hawaii. But the fact is, most of it's crazy, and it sounds so good. People were talking about electric cars. I mean, England too. I mean,
Yep,
this was in the news the other day,
yep,
in Britain, that they're looking forward to cooperating with global warming, and every car in Great Britain should be an electric car.
that's right.
This is lunacy. Okay, this is somebody jumping to a great idea because it sounds great. Okay, hey, electric cars. It's true. Electric cars do not burn carbon fuels. They don't burn fossil fuels.
Yeah,
But what do they do? Okay, they use electricity.
that's
So
correct.
all we have to do is put electricity into our cars and they'll work perfectly. I mean, I hope everybody's understanding how crazy this sounds, because you can't just take electricity. It's not as though lightning is going to come down and charge your battery. Okay.
Yeah.
What you have to do is you have to turn an internal combustion engine in order to get the electricity to then charge the battery in your car. Now, yes, if a person has their own solar panels, then they're not going to be adding to the grid, plugging into the grid. But if you take whatever it is, 140 million cars in the United States, whatever the number is, if you take, I have no idea how many cars and lorries there are in Great
UK,
Britain,
yeah.
but
Millions,
if you,
millions, yeah.
but
Can't
if
get
you,
can't get nowhere. So clearly, yes, there's too many.
all right, well, let's put it this way. In the United States, about 10% of the electricity that we use now is manufactured by solar, by wind, by nuclear, by non fossil fuels, by renewable resources.
That's correct.
Okay, technically, nuclear may not be renewable, but nevertheless, it's not adding to the problem.
Yeah.
So, but that's 10%. So if I plug in the very next car, it's not using the 10% that's on renewable resources. It's using it's now going to burn more carbon. It's going to burn more coal or more oil or more gas. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're an alcoholic, it doesn't matter if it's beer, wine, or scotch, or what. It doesn't make any difference. Alcohol is alcohol. Carbon burning from fossil fuels is carbon burning fossil fuels that otherwise would have been stored. So if we take these fossil fuels and we burn them and turn a generator, okay,
Mm-hmm.
now instead of using a very high performance, which our cars have, engine that then turns the wheels of the car, causing forward momentum or back, or one way or the other, instead of doing that, okay, what they want to do is they want to take that engine and they want to put it into a power plant, a much bigger engine, and they're going to lose energy because they're going to be burning fossil fuels because they're not using the renewable resources. So then they want to then take that energy and they're going to put it in long wires. Now we use high voltage because it lowers the loss over long distances of that we would lose in electricity, because it forms a flux around it. It eats it up traveling. Even high voltage lines though lose some, and then it travels through low voltage lines. There's a loss on the electricity before it gets to your battery.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to put it through a transformer. If the transformers lose a little bit of power, then you're going to put it through another transformer. So you're charging the battery with 12-volt power or whatever you're putting into it, and that's going to be fine. And then that battery it is going to then run an electric motor, and you're going to have a little bit of loss there, and then you're going to turn the wheels, and there you go. So every time there's another transaction, every time you go through one generator to then a charger to this, there's always a loss. So you're going to be plugging in 130 here, and I don't know how many million
Yeah,
there,
I don't even know what it is
20,
here.
30 million cars in Great Britain. You're going to be plugging them all into the grid, which is now overextended already. And you're going to plug all these in, and you're going to be burning carbon fossil fuels in order to get the energy into those cars so that they can travel and look like they're not using any kind of power at all, that isn't just magic electricity. So it's anybody who gives this any thought, anyone who knows science knows I'm telling the truth. I'll tell you, any mechanic
You know.
that is in this audience knows exactly what I'm talking about, and they know I'm telling the truth.
Yeah.
That this is insanity. So here we've got two extremes: people that think they know the answers as to how to fix this that have no clue, and people that are just in denial of it that have no clue. And we really need to, and that's what the Global Warming Foundation is about. We need to be able to pull on science to find ideas that will be able to be implemented to somehow help this situation.
Wow.
You know,
And it's funny the way you've explained it. I did wonder electricity. How do you make the electricity for us to have it? So it's got to come from. And now you've just explained it. The whole process and mechanism.
oh, it
Get it?
doesn't make any
It's just
sense.
what it's actually more that they'll be doing more.
It will consume more fossil fuels by far than if people are just burning it in their internal combustion engines as they are now. I mean, perhaps take somebody who's, where the rings are bad in their engine, and their out comes all the black smoke out of their exhaust. Okay, fine, clamp down on those that are not running
Yeah.
efficiently, but at the same time, switching it all over to electric is, to say nothing of what this is going to cost, whether it's even possible to get that many magnets, that much copper wiring. That, I mean, I suppose they could do it, but there's
Mm,
a cost to the economy, and there's an economical cost, but even more so, there's a cost that's in terms of making these things. There's no way to make copper wire without using some source of energy to do it.
yeah, that's correct.
So that's the other part of it, is like, what is it going to cost? What does it cost to even make solar panels to make that effective? And there's a lot that is unanswered in this regard. There's got to be a different kind of way of looking at this, uh, where, especially the United States, but also, countries that are capable, such as Britain and the rest of Europe, where they get together and say, okay, what can be done? Can we put some kind of a block between the sun and the earth that will, cool the South Pole, and
Yeah,
to
it's
help alleviate this? Are there other things that can be done? And that's called geoengineering. And that's where science needs to come together, and where there's hope. But there's no hope looking at this thing politically. The people that are in charge. I mean, I remember Al Gore, when he was a younger congressman. Apparently, or a younger senator, he believed in global warming back then, and he attempted to get some things done. Nobody on either side believed it or would work with him about anything. Uh, I know now people talk about him, where he uh, invented the internet, of course, and supposedly, and to take credit for certain things, where he's now in a different world where he's not respected anymore. But there was a time where he had some good, honest concerns about this, and it was going nowhere. Now it's still going nowhere, except that one side wants to spend a fortune going nowhere, and the other one doesn't want to spend anything at all.
cool. It's almost, as you said, sanity is doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same insane response or outcome. You'd have to literally be in the mood, and I don't mean it I say that in a pun way, to not see what is happening in front of our own eyes. As you said, floods within the last 30 days, torrential floods, like clouds that don't even move. That's what's scary. Like a cloud will just sit there and rain, and you're getting like rainfall that you would have in months in hours.
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you something. Like, and 1 degree makes so much of a difference, because You know, the Atlantic Ocean, the surface of the Atlantic may be like 1 degree warmer. So you take the coast off of Brazil on the Atlantic side. Okay, it used to be that the warmth of the water would cause vapor to form. It would go up. It would form clouds.
Yeah.
The clouds would drift over the rainforests, and then they would rain, and it would pour out. And now that 1 degree of greater warmth has given that much more vapor coming up. So the vapor does go up, it forms in the clouds, and then they drift. But before they get to land, they rain out. And so people worry about cutting the rainforest and so on, but that's not really the problem because it's turning into a desert. The water table is declining, going down on a steady basis at this point, whether the trees are cut or not at this point. So, you know, there's different, again, feedback effects and where we're going. Nothing in this planet stands by itself. But the true place where you want to worry, if you want to worry about something, it's not the rainstorms. Yes, we get a few deaths. Yes, we get maybe even more than a few. Who knows how this will add up and how bad these floods will get. But the real problem is going to be the droughts. And we've got some serious droughts all over the world from, I mean, just in this last month again, looking at Kazakhstan, there's pictures you can see on the internet of horses that lay dead because of the drought and because of the heat waves. Afghanistan, you know, it's in the news on many levels, but it's not there on the basis of the fact that it's in serious drought and they're about to start starving there. Asia, from India to Taiwan, is got very serious record temperatures and drought occurring. In Argentina, they've got like what they're calling 1 in 100 years of drought, and the grains are now affected there. And that's the stuff to watch. All of California in the Northwest, it's in drought. Brazil has drought. So when you look at these droughts, then you're talking about the food supply of the earth.
That's correct.
And these droughts are in every continent. I mean, Antarctica, believe it or not, with all that ice, Antarctica is actually a desert. But that has been for a long time. It doesn't get much rain down there. Or I should say it doesn't get any rain. It doesn't get much snow. The fact is that the other 6 continents are all suffering drought. And right now, the food supply is still there. But look at Argentina. See, let me explain it this way. Right now, we have 20 to 31,000 polar bears. It depends on which organization is measuring it. You know, everyone has a range, but the lowest of the low range is 20,000. The highest of the high range is 31,000. Doesn't matter. Let's say we've got about 25, 26,000 polar bears on the planet. And they're doing all right. They're not all dying out all of a sudden. You know, they're endangered, but they're not dying. They're endangered because they have to eat enough seals every summer to be able to make it through the winter. And the way they eat the seals, and they get the seals, is by going out on the ice floes. And they have to sometimes swim from one to the next or from the ice to land. And so far, for the most part, only a few of them can't make the distance. Most of them can make the swim. But these ice floes are getting fewer and further between. And they're melting earlier in the season. So what's happening is the distance between them gets greater. And we will reach a point, probably within a couple of years, where most of the polar bears aren't able to quite make that swim and they drown. And so all of a sudden there we're going to see thousands of them, and then each year we're going to see a whole mess of thousands of them that are disappearing, and then they're going to disappear. It's not something that's a gradual thing. It comes relatively quickly because it just gets to a certain point where they just can no longer make the swim. Which is, you know, I'm saying it so matter-of-factly, but believe it or not, you know, it hurts my heart to even think about these things because, you know, I've been watching them for a long time. I understand them. I want to impart it without emotion. that's what's going to happen with us. If and when our food supply starts dwindling, then we're going to start losing more. And that's going to impact on us. And unless you believe some of the crazy notions that are out there that some people want to control the population and they're doing that through certain ways or whatever, nobody is being in a position to help us in that regard. You know, maybe Bill Gates has bought up a lot of acres of farmland in the United States. Who knows? These are things you hear. But what's he going to do with that farmland if he doesn't have water to grow the crops? So this is where our vulnerability is. We still have time to fix this, but we need to look for more imaginative ways of doing it than simply having everybody stop using fossil fuels, because there's no way that we can stop using fossil fuels. It's like saying, I got a solution. Everybody stop eating. Nobody eat anymore, and we'll be fine. Except that we can't survive if we're not eating. So it's sort of the same thing. We survive because of fossil fuels. It's not just what causes our cars to go, it's what causes our agriculture to grow. And so we're kind of in a stuck position in this way that neither side of the political spectrum is able to really find a cure for. So that's where we are. And
renewability, you mentioned 10%. Us increasing renewable energy, will that help? If we now started to lean, as I say, lean the pivot more towards renewable energy and less towards fossil fuel, things like sustainability, things like eating less meat, because obviously what actually happens when they burn meat, and just literally pivoting, would that make a little difference as individuals? Like, we started to get more intentional about having solar powered houses, and really certain borough districts in the world start going, right, our manifesto in London is this.
Every year we add to the carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere. It's not as though we keep it steady. Every year we're adding. And as we add it, it causes more acceleration to the problem. So the more that we can use less, the more we reduce the acceleration. And that there's no question that helps. The reason, by the way, of red meat, the reason that is thought to add to the problem is because cattle emit a lot of methane gas.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know that. I wondered
Yes,
what that was.
they talk of bovine farts. That's what they talk about, but it isn't. It isn't. Anybody, if you ever hear that from somebody, they don't know what they're talking about, because cows have rumens, and they have an extra stomach basically that first processes the grass that they eat, and that causes the gas to come out, and they belch it. 95% of the methane that comes out of a cow comes out of its mouth. So that's the issue. That's the issue with red meat, is the red meat comes from cattle, which have their own way of emitting methane, which, as I say, is far more potent as a quote unquote greenhouse gas.
I understand. So, okay, we're in code red, and it appears that it's not reversible. It is, we can slow it down, but we can't now undo, am I right, what's damage has been done. I mean, I always think of the earth as a human body. You know, a lot of bodies, we poison it by smoking, by alcohol, and all the things that we do over time. And then they say for you that, eat healthier and take vitamins and start living a healthy lifestyle, actually you can't restore it completely, but you can become a little bit more renewed. Can we renew it, is the question? Because with this earth, it feels like it's on its last legs. Literally, they call it last days biblically, they call it end of times, they call it Nostradamus, they call it all different things. Can we renew? Can we reset our earth if we all do our part? Or is it that we're just going to slow it down, and eventually it's gonna, it sounds horrible what I'm saying, but it's always good to know where we're at, because it feels like there's a speed, there's a urgency happening right now. in the last 30 days, what I've witnessed by turning on the TV has been quite disturbing. So if that can happen in 30 days, what does 5 years look like? You know, what does it mean? A year look like, 6 months look like.
You know, there are many cultures that think the way you think, and it's a very intelligent way of thinking that the earth is like a body. And there are in the United States, there are a certain number of Indian tribes where that's the way they were thinking hundreds of years ago. And they see it, you know, we talk about Mother Earth, not it Earth. And in a way, it is a living, breathing organism of its own. And it's going to go on even after we're all gone. It's not gonna die, and it's not gonna fall out of the solar system, jump into the sun, melt. It's still gonna be here. And I mean, 250 million years ago, we lost almost all life on Earth. The only life that was left were some microscopic bacteria that were under the ocean where the lava flowed out, where there's enough. Somehow that led to all life coming again and being formed again. I believe that if intelligent minds can prevail, it doesn't have to prevail over the whole earth in terms of making sure that everybody's on board. But if we could basically look at this from the point of view of like, what are we going to do? You know, how do we fix this? How do we think out of the box? Because the two boxes of denial and spend the hell out of doing nothing, you know, neither one of them work. Neither one of them have any are realistic at all. I mean, it sounds great. Everybody should have an electric car, but nobody's questioning this as being idiotic. You know, I guess I'm telling you, and I'm telling your audience that the emperor has no clothes.
Absolutely.
Because everybody thinks that these solutions could actually do something and can actually work. It doesn't. It makes it worse.
Yeah.
So but there are solutions that could be. I mean, but just you know, why not? We have a space force in the United States, and Russia has some abilities up there, and China has. I mean, perhaps there's a way of simply putting a ring of moon dust around the Earth. I mean, there have to be things that can be done that could cool the Earth to some extent. That the reason that it isn't being done is there's political reasons not to. I mean, what happens if we do that, and then Sweden turns into a popsicle?
Yeah,
You know,
that's the thing. You can't. You're almost controlling the whole thesis of what Earth is, and it's a dangerous game, and we don't know enough. We've got intelligence far greater than most, and we're always learning. And there's some brilliant minds, but
where are the task forces? Where are the government officials who are who aren't just saying, "Oh yes, get on board," and go to the Paris Accords and agree to something that is not going to cure anything? I mean, it has great goals, and you know, it'd be wonderful if things like that could work. The only problem is that it's not going to work, and it's just like you said. It's the same as having a sick body, a sick individual. You know, and you know, somebody's got cancer, and somebody says, "Oh, well, all you have to do is pray to this particular god, and you'll get better." Well, it doesn't necessarily work, you know, and you know, which false gods are there before us that we are now bowing to, that are saying this is the answer, this is where we go, and this is what we do for the global warming problem. And you know, ultimately, one way or the other, it's, you know, we have so many people on the planet. I mean, you know, it took in the time of Jesus, we had about 200 million people on the planet. It took 1,800 years. The year 1804, nobody says, 1804, that's an important year. Nobody knows that's an important year. That's a very important year. That's the year we hit 1 billion. So it took 1,800 years to multiply that 200 by 5. Then it only took 120 years to 1924 to double the 1 billion to 2 billion. Then once we doubled that, once we were at 2 billion, it took only 75 years to triple that and hit 6 billion in 1999. And now we're already at 8 billion, or just below 8 billion. Yeah. But we're on the threshold of 8 billion. So it's everybody's entitled in cold countries to have heat. Now it's getting to be everybody in the warm countries are entitled to have air conditioning. We're entitled to ice in the heat and warmth in the cold. It's all fossil fuels. And if the more numbers we have to be able to sustain the lives of this number of people is where we ran into our problem of overpopulation. We're like bacteria on a petri dish. And ultimately we consume the nutrients. And that's where we're going. You know, I hate this interview I'm doing with you, okay, because I sound so pessimistic. You're bringing out the worst in me, okay?
You know what it is? You're just telling the truth. I think a lot of people are just, I know it's a lot. We've gone through a lot over the last 18 months or more now. And I think people are more sensitive to what is happening. As I said, people are seeing things that they've never seen in their lifetime, if I'll be honest. I think these last 2 years have shown us things that we've never seen in our lifetime. But like I said at the beginning before we spoke, we can have everything but have nothing if there's nothing to breathe. It means absolutely nothing. You know, we're speaking now on Zoom. We're going to have a show. We're talking about all what we got to do. But what can we really do without the climate being functional? We're trying to now look at our own health. You know, everyone is trying to do the best they can to live a healthier life because of this horrible infection that's been populating and taking over the earth. But even with all of that, okay, that's our body, but our body, the earth is the body of the earth, isn't it? And we're not looking after that. So we can look after ourselves, but if the earth is not good, it means nothing. You can have a beautiful house on the hill, but then it's burned down by a fire. You know, there's so many, it's like opposites, and we need to really stop now. And now we're looking at ourselves and our health, but we have to look at the health of the world. That's the best way to describe it. And it's something that's necessary. And it is sad to hear it, but it's the truth. And sometimes you have to hear the truth to know. It's like, sadly, people go and get their blood pressure checked and they realize they've got high blood pressure. Okay, I need to get it down. What do I need to do? Eat better. It's what we're seeing. The code red is that all the forest fires and the floods, it's the world, it's the earth screaming and saying, help me, please. And we have to listen and do something. And we've been putting band-aids and we've been doing little things, tapping it up and patching it. Can't do that anymore. It's evident there's a problem. And we all have a duty.
But there is a hope.
I think so.
I'm not without hope.
Yeah.
It's just that it needs to be organized and brought together. It needs to come together because it seems that there's an absence of it. I don't see any. I mean, we have all these think tanks, all these political think tanks, and all of these different organizations dealing with vaccines and dealing with so many different aspects of the situation. Who's working on geoengineering?
Well, what's your plans, Peter? What you've got the foundation, you're putting out the message. What would do you want to lobby in government? What do you think needs to be done in America? I mean, America's a whole conundrum of stuff. So it's bigger. There's so many different levels to what happens in America. I've learned that myself.
I think the goal is, well, the goal is to find a viable plan of radical geoengineering of the planet.
Okay.
It can be done. We have enough wherewithal as the human race to be able to put these things together. Of course, if we merge ourselves into a world war, we'll never be able to do it. But I don't think we're necessarily doing that. I think people are a little smarter than they used to be in terms of the pros and cons of aggression. So I'm hopeful that that's not. I don't smell the winds of war necessarily, but we may be getting into some different kind of situation with what they're calling a new world order in terms of how we arrange our society. And as to the meaning of individualism and so on, which concerns me. But even with that, we should be able to put together such a viable plan that it would be able to be done. And that's why I have hope. And I look at the question is, we want to save the world, but what kind of world can we save?
Yeah.
So we need to also project and find out where's the real spot where we're able to toe the line. And you hear the scientists saying, well, we don't want to go over 1.5 degrees. Well, that's impossible. We're going to go over that. Or we don't want to go over 2 degrees. Okay, maybe that's possible. Maybe 2.5 is possible. But it's only possible in the event that we're able to curtail the problem. And we can only curtail the problem if we find the solution and the way to curtail it. It's like anything else. If you talk to successful business people, you find there's always one thing that they all have in common, which is they didn't stop and say, well, how am I going to do that anyway? All right. They all looked at the goal and found a goal. They formulated their goals. And then after they formulated the goals, they figured out how to achieve them. They don't think like typical people. The highly successful people, they think in a different way. They think in terms of forming goals. And then they turn their resources and minds to how they're going to do it. So here, if nothing else seems to be working, we need to switch and say, okay, well, what's our goal? And then figure out how do we achieve it. If the goal is to geoengineer, then how do we do it in such a way that would actually give us the most benefit? I mean, imagine, can it be done? Do we have the resources to put a 1,000-mile by 1,000-mile piece of aluminum foil up in space to block the sun in a certain place? Wow. If we did, we had hurricanes, we could drag it and put it in the path of the hurricane, so over the path of the hurricane, I should say, so that the water cools before the hurricane gets to it, or simply just cool the poles so that the rest of the earth then gets the benefit of the mix. Of course, so I mean, there is hope of how this can be done, but it is going to take some organizing and to make sure that that's the approach and where it goes.
And as an organization, everyone has a part to play, but what part could you play in that conceptualization of geo? And what are you doing? Are you encouraging other people to join forces? Because no man is an island. You need a team, people coming together.
Well, right. I've had this thing as merely, I knew that someday I would need, look, I'm a lawyer. What do lawyers know about science? But believe me, some lawyers do cases that involve science. So, if I have a case involving a sleeping pill, I need to know what a triazolobenzodiazepine is. I need to know better than the experts know, so I can cross-examine them and make them real. Yes. So, so I needed something, and I saw in 2008 that, that I was going to need a platform in the years to come. Nobody was believing it. Even that recently, nobody believed in global warming. Since then, Al Gore came out with his movie, and then that's when people started believing it. So, and a man I admire greatly, who was recently the president of the United States, he doesn't believe in global warming at all still, okay? Although I'm sure he does, because his military had to let him know that this is a problem. And he's not a stupid man at all. Mm-hmm. So, so what I did then, I maintained a website. So now that website's being updated and made into a better form. I've hired a better person to be running it as a CEO, and we're forming a board. And now it's time. Now the time is right. Now that you've been given the red code, that's also a red code to us, that this is the time when people should be able to listen to common sense as to where we need to go to be able to fix this. And hopefully we'll succeed in that whole adventure.
I believe you will. And what can the everyday man do? Obviously, not to say that we're segregating or separating. Everyone has a part to play in this journey. Elements. And people, this is what's scary about people. They're like, well, it's not happening to me, or my house is not flooding, or I'm not having forest fires, or actually it's not really true. You know, there's a lot of pessimism and skepticism, but everybody can play a part. The small, the children have done it. Actually, children are setting the foundation because it's their future, isn't it? But what can people do individually to
Interesting.
help?
Well, you know, I've always said that there's only two kinds of people, or I've said for many years, there's only two kinds of people on the planet. There are people who believe in global warming,
Hmm,
and there are people who will believe in global warming.
I like that.
And that's where it's going to have to go because, I mean, except for, you know, somebody who's just absolutely intent on not seeing reality, because there is also that.
Yeah.
But where can people help? Every little bit, you know, you talked in terms of the fact we have 10% in the United States of our energy is being made by renewable resources. Well, that 10% is pretty important. It helps slow down the process. The more we slow down the process, the better chances we have of being able to come to some form of a remedy. So, I mean, it's like we have this light, this hope. So
Yes.
every time you leave a room and turn off the lights behind you, you're helping to elongate the time that we still have a reason to hope.
Yes.
So that's something that's within every one of our means, not wasting energy.
Yes.
And, you know, frankly, I live that way. So I can say that without being hypocritical, although most people don't. And yes, when I travel, I fly by jet. I'm not about to, you know, walk all the way from Vermont to Florida to be able to save on energy because I need to be able to perform and need to be a living person on the planet. So, you know, when we mock people because they fly by jet and they're concerned about global warming, that's a silly idea. You know, yes, they're consuming more, but every little bit that we can save, every little bit that we are not consuming adds up. I mean, let's face it, there's the 8 billion people on the planet.
Yeah. It'd be
If,
amazing.
yeah, if every one of them would give me $1, you know, I'd have $8 billion.
It's true. So if everyone did their little part, whatever, as I said, from turning off their light, conserving energy, you know, plant-based. I'm doing a lot of plant-based of late. I'm trying my hardest to have that part of my, you know, diet, keeping your clothes, recycling, upcycling, all these different things that they call it. And just being aware and actually loving the earth that we live in. People, am I right in saying, Peter, we was locked down, especially in the UK and little parts of America, and some didn't close at all. That's a whole nother conversation. But we were dying to be connected with nature. That's what a holiday is, isn't it? Like being on the beach, being around the green, being around the beach, being around sea. It's quite interesting that our natural habitat is to be around earth and all what it gives you. So without them realizing, they're loving that element of being able to be in a different space, the heat. You know, we're from the UK, so we don't have great weather, but we've had great weather of late. So all the way you feel when you've not been you've been restricted, you can't be in the space of earth and just feel the earth. They need to then realize that it's part of you why you feel that need. And that means you do love it. That means you actually do love animals. You do love the earth. So why aren't you then doing that a little bit more to protect it?
Exactly. Exactly. It's not the little bit that you do, it's the little bit that you and everybody else would do. Just change a few little habits and it will help.
It will. And how can they connect with you? Where do they go to connect with the Global Warming Foundation? How can they join and be a part of your movement?
Okay, well, we have the Global Warming Foundation. It's the globalwarmingfoundation.com
Yes.
or tgwf.org. Okay.
Yes.
And that's our website. If you want to contact me personally, uh, considering a website's down right now, I'm sure that I just get people my same email every time. It's easy. It's PT, my initials, like piano tango, PT at legalbrains.com.
Definitely.
Okay.
You know, Peter, you're doing amazing. I think a lot of people, they should have listened to you back in the day. It's typical, isn't it? You know, you give them some information and they're like, no, 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 over dinner, over a drink. And now they're wanting to hear everything. I bet they're phoning you every day, like, Peter, what's your thoughts on this? You was already talking about it. It's typical, isn't it? But it shows you're a visionary. It shows that you want to change. It shows that you are going to change. Your legacy will be this what you stood for and what you thought about back in the day, you're now seeing come to pass, but you're actually going to make it and amend it and make it better. And that's an amazing thing. A lot of people can't say they've got that as part of their legacy.
Well, I, I'm a driven person, and I'm up early every morning, and I put in a full day every day.